Let's go live now to London to speak to the Deputy Editor of Spectator, Freddy Gray. Freddy, thanks for joining us. This significant announcement from Starmer just in the last few minutes about the two-state solution. Was this expected when he recalled government from recess?
Well, he was certainly under a lot of pressure to recognise Palestine as a state from his MPs. It was more of a domestic crisis than an international one for Labour internally, because they had this huge pressure from their backbenches and from their voters to do something about Palestine, to speak out against Israel, and to address the humanitarian situation in a meaningful way. This sort of, we will recognise Palestine as a state at the UN in September if you don't agree to a ceasefire, is a new development. And it strikes me as a slightly odd one, because what it suggests is that if Israel does suddenly agree to a ceasefire and flood the area with humanitarian aid, then Labour will not recognise Palestine as a state. What it's essentially saying is that it will recognise Palestine as a state if it's being persecuted and oppressed. This is an odd dynamic, and it feels to me a little bit like a sort of desperate measure from a group of people who wanted to go on summer holiday, have been dragged back because of a crisis within their government, and have come up with this as a sort of fudged solution.
Do you think, Freddie, that Swinney and Starmer had this conversation when they were in Scotland? It seems very hot on the foot of that visit. Maybe Trump had an influence because, as we know, the US have boycotted the two-state UN meeting that's been taking place in New York. So was there maybe a conversation that went on in Turnberry that was about this?
I think they were very keen to push Donald Trump to make a statement about the suffering of the people in Palestine. I think that what he did say, that it was horrible to see images of starving children, and that has been turned into a shift from Donald Trump. But if you listen to what he said in the round, he was still very much focusing on Israeli hostages. He was careful not to say anything too critical of Israel. And so Trump didn't really shift, but he gave them the quote that enabled them to say or feel that Trump has shifted his position, and therefore America is a bit more on side than it was. I think they might have been overspinning that a little bit. But certainly they got what they wanted because they did want Trump to appear to be on board so that they could shift their own position in favour of Palestine.
You did mention at the onset as well, but this announcement seems a bit like international diplomacy, but maybe there's domestic pressure as well from the UK voters. Do you think that it's potentially that which has caused Keir Starmer to come out and say, we will recognise, given the time, at the United Nations in September, Palestine as a state?
Undoubtedly. One has to remember that Keir Starmer became leader off the back of his campaign against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. So he's always been very, very nervous about criticising Israel, about distancing himself from Israel. He has ties to Israel. So he's not comfortable in a position where he's antagonising Israel and even Bibi Netanyahu. So it's definitely to do with intense pressure from his voters and also a threat to Labour's left from Gaza independents, that's Muslim independents, who are taking up a lot of Muslim voters in urban areas, taking them away from Labour. And that's, in the future, potentially a serious electoral problem for Labour. So he has a big, big domestic problem when it comes to this issue. And that's what he's trying to address first and foremost.
So do you think that's what we're seeing here, Freddie? Is Labour shifting its tone on the Palestinian statehood, a political shift, political optics? What's at play here, do you think?
Well, I suppose I am sounding quite cynical. I think there are a lot of Labour people, including people in the Labour cabinet, who are sincerely concerned because the images are terrible. It's a terrible situation, and they want something to be done. That's certainly true. But I mean, I am cynical because I've been following Westminster for a while. And when governments take actions like this, it's usually because there's some domestic pressure, there's some threat to their own authority, to their own coalition. And Labour has a huge majority, but a huge majority of Labour MPs want their government to do something about this. So that's what's going on. That's the driving factor.
Let's talk about Trump for a second. His instinct for public mood, which is to the fore once again. Do you think his remarks while he was there in Turnberry, are they marking a bit of a broader change in Western rhetoric, that combined with Keir Starmer's announcement today?
Yes, certainly. I think Trump has a gut level instinct, or some might say even genius, for what most people are thinking. And the point is, particularly in the last month, last couple of weeks, most people have started to think, hang on, what Israel needs to stop. This is getting out of control. This situation is truly terrible, and it's unambiguously terrible now. So, yes, I think Trump will understand that at a sort of gut level. At the same time, though, he's very close to Israel, has been for some time. His policies as a president have often been aligned with Israel. If you think about the first term, the Abraham Accords and so on, these were great strides in many ways in the Middle East, but they were what Israel wanted. Israel, in some ways, dictated Trump's foreign policy in the Middle East and has done also this term with Iran and so on. So, yeah, I think instinctively he understands that the public mood has changed, but he's also very connected to Israel, is unwilling to upset even Netanyahu, who he has problems with.
Freddy Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, thank you so much for joining us on W News.